The Z3000 Pro is one of the newest players of Zidoo's in-home streaming lineup for 2024, and while we've reviewed a few of their offerings in the past, the Z3000 Pro promises a lot of new features that hope to set it apart from the rest. So this is going to be my no-nonsense take on the ins and outs of this player and whether or not it's worth adding to your setup. Inside the box, Zidoo does a really good job packing the player and everything else that comes with it. You get a wireless backlit remote, which is identical to the older remotes, and we really like the design. You also get an HDMI cable, an AC power cord, some documentation, and the player itself, which of course takes after the previous Z2000 Pro model. Unfortunately, the first thing we noticed when we set the unit down on our table was that the chassis wasn't quite level, and it rocked a little back and forth between the feet. Now, this really isn't going to affect the performance or functionality of the player, but it is a little disappointing. Our Z2000 Pro didn't have this issue, so it's possible that this is a one-off situation, but we felt like it was worth mentioning. Other than that, it's a pretty standard steel chassis with a nice aluminum faceplate covering a single 3.5-inch hard drive bay for adding local storage to the player. Now, as far as looks, the Z2000 Pro was pretty similar. You can see here that they changed the outside appearance a little, mainly the hard drive door, and they also removed the pattern on the display window of the Z3000 Pro. One of the USB ports has also been removed from behind the hard drive door, but these two players are still pretty similar for the most part. A lot of the changes with the Z3000 Pro are going to be related to the inside, and we actually took the top cover off so we could see what the insides actually look like. For 2024, Zidoo has upgraded all of their players with brand new 8K SoCs. And for those of you that aren't familiar, the SoC basically contains the CPU, GPU, and other critical components all in one chip. This chip is the S928X from Amlogic, which we actually saw in the new Dune HD 8K player that we reviewed recently. This is a pretty capable chip with 5 CPU cores and of course a new GPU that should support full 8K 60 playback over HDMI 2.1. But we don't have a display to test this feature right now, so we can't really say how well it works. The SoC is paired with 8GB of DDR4 RAM and 64GB of storage, which is also increased from the Z2000 Pro and puts it more in line with my UHD 5000. Speaking of which, it also gets a few other staple features from the higher end line, like the dual HDMI ports with split video and audio output. So if your AV receiver doesn't support 4K or 8K, you can use the secondary HDMI output for your receiver and use the main output for your TV or projector. Now, one thing I want to quickly mention here, for those of you that like to play movies in 3D, Zidoo decided to take that ability away from the new players. So if that's important to you, you might want to just stick with one of the older players that can play 3D. Aside from that, most of the really big changes with the new Zidoo lineup are actually going to be found in the software. And I want to get right into some of the improvements here, because you can tell that Zidoo has done a really good job refining what they had with their previous software, which, like many other streaming devices, is built on top of Android TV. But I have to say that they've done a lot more here than just slapping a lazy skin on top of the default Android menus. And while the Zidoo players are Android TV boxes under the hood, they aren't actually meant to be used with streaming services like Netflix or Amazon Prime. Of course, you might be able to sideload these apps, but it's not officially supported by Zidoo. Instead, the user interface on the Z3000 Pro is designed to make it as simple as possible to access your media from sources that are local to the player, like a NAS in your home network, a hard drive inside of the player, or even another Zidoo player nearby, which I'll talk more about later in the video. The main screen is split up into 5 different sections for files, videos, music, applications, and settings, which are all pretty self-explanatory, but new to this version of the UI is the quick access drawer you can pull down by pressing the down button at the home screen. Here you can pin apps and functionality that you want to have easy access to. And in my opinion, the styling of these menus is a lot better than the previous software offered by Zidoo. A lot of the core functionality of the player has stayed the same. I'm still a huge fan of the poster wall, and it looks even better than it did before because Zidoo has updated the UI from 1080 to 4K, which can be changed in the settings, and it really makes a big improvement in text clarity, especially on a projector. Something that hasn't improved much from the older players is the scraping ability. Just going through our library, I was able to count dozens of movies that failed to match or matched incorrectly. Now, to be fair, this is bound to happen when you're bringing in lots of movies for the first time. The good thing is, it doesn't take long to fix, assuming your movie is available from one of their built-in content providers. As far as playback goes, the movies look just as good as they did on our older UHD 5000 player, paired with either a 4K TV or 4K projector. We also tried playing uncompressed 4K Blu-ray rips off our Synology NAS, and over Ethernet everything was perfectly smooth. We tried built-in Wi-Fi as well, but with how far away our upstairs theater is from our router, the results were pretty underwhelming. So we recommend always making sure you have access to a wired connection if possible. Now, as we mentioned, unfortunately we don't have an 8K display on hand to test 8K. But even if we did, there isn't really a lot of 8K content available right now. And we feel like 4K Blu-ray is going to be a really good medium for a long time. Aside from that, Zidoo also did a pretty big overhaul of their music player software that supports integration with most of the major music streamer services out right now, and will automatically scrape your media to help you organize your collection, just like with movies. Something else you can do that I personally thought was pretty cool was using the built-in CD player function. And of course, the Zidoo doesn't have a CD player built in, but as it turns out, if you plug a regular CD drive into a USB port on the player, it'll actually use that as a CD transport, and it'll even grab metadata from a current disc that's playing. Another recent addition is the Zidoo controller app, which is a free download for both Android and iOS, and this basically gives you another way to control the player. You can access settings and media and even cast the display of your player over to your phone, all of which are pretty cool features. In my experience though, the app wasn't able to auto-detect the player over the network, so I had to type in its IP address manually to connect. And once you get it set up, you don't really get any added functionality outside of what you can already do with the remote in the regular player interface. But it's still nice to have quicker access to change settings, for example. I don't quite understand why the navigation buttons work like a joystick though, since it seems like it's really hard to control the player. I'm always going to prefer a physical remote more, but this could be a nice option. So what do you think? Are the features that come with these new players worth the upgrade over the last generation of players? Well, I think that's going to depend on how important 8K playback is to you, which could in the future be a reason, but for now, as we mentioned, there is just not enough content out there to justify it in our opinion. As far as the other features go, there are a lot of nice improvements with these new players, but I'm not really sure if it would be a worthwhile upgrade if you already have a Z3000 Pro. With that said, if you don't have an in-home streamer, then I feel like this is one of the best offerings Zidoo has come out with so far. So in the end, it's really going to depend on your situation and whether or not you want the latest and greatest features, and also the future-proofing that comes with the new 8K abilities and improved hardware. As of right now, the Z3000 Pro is available on Amazon for $679, and if that's a little more than you want to spend, they also offer the Z30 Pro, which is also 8K and has a full-size hard drive bay, for $429. So there are some options out there if you're really wanting one of their new 8K players. And with that said, we're going to wrap up this video. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss any of our future content. And as always, have an awesome day.